Hello and welcome to Bulletin Bytes, your podcast from Bulletin Box, a place where we talk to people from different walks of life about life. I'm your host Tiwo, and today we are talking about transformation through reinvention. What does that mean? How can we transform ourselves through invention? And to talk about that, we have Sheila Berman with us. Hi Sheila.
Hello Tiwo.
Sheila is the Customer Success Manager with a digital innovation hub called DigiB Ep8. And today we are talking about how have you reinvented yourself over the years, right?
Yes, exactly.
I want to start from the start. You are from the Philippines, who've lived in Australia, who've lived in the US, and now we are sitting in Singapore recording this. Why and how that happened?
I suppose life happens.
Yeah?
Well, if you want to really go into this, I was born in the Philippines, yes, and that's where I've lived my quarter of my life, I would say. And then from the Philippines, I moved to Australia to join my then fiance at the time, who is now my husband.
Yay.
And then moved to America because our startup business got sold. And then after our visa was about to expire when we were in the United States and we were given a choice of whether we should stay or go, we said we're going. And because there were a lot of things happening at that time as well. And then we chose Singapore, and that's why we're here.
Lovely. And IT startup, and I know that you did not start in IT, you did not start in digital marketing or in the digital space. You started in economics.
Yes, so I finished a degree in economics in the Philippines, and my first job was actually working with a project consulting company, working with the Philippine government and helping them implement I believe it was a school building project, and it was a grant by the World Bank as well as by the Japan Bank for International Cooperation. So my role at that time was a mixture of everything. It was a combination of advocacy, a combination of events management, a combination of promotion as well, because we were trying to get the stakeholders very involved.
Right.
So I would consider it more of a social project at that time, a social community project. That's where I started. And then from there, I moved to Australia.
Yeah.
Studied fashion design.
Fashion design,
completely unrelated.
Because why wouldn't you after economics?
Exactly. Well, to be fair, I actually did not pick economics. Economics kind of picked me because my father said you have to pick pre-law. And pre-law at that time was either commerce. And under commerce, you have economics, finance, you have management, marketing. And then when I was queuing up, I was looking at the queues, and the shortest one was in economics.
So, like most Asian kids, you weren't also given much of a choice.
No, I didn't really have a choice because I wanted to study political science.
Wow.
I got into this school, a university, where I got into economics, and then just to hedge my bet, I said, okay, fine, I'll get a pre-law and take up economics in another university, but I was really angling to get into political science.
Wow.
And my father, who graduated political science, said no, because it was impractical. I said, okay.
Okay. And then you moved to Australia, and then you started learning fashion designing.
Yes, and so because the reason why I studied fashion design was because my husband said, you're spending too much. Can't you do something where you spend, but at the same time you turn it into something else?
So you were spending on clothes?
Oh yeah, I was spending a lot on clothes at that time. I thought it was actually
investment.
Or I was within budget, but apparently for him it's like, okay, maybe I'm going to support you in whatever it is, but maybe find something that would really be of interest.
Yeah.
Because also at the time I said I'm tired of getting into the whole social community project. I wanted to do something different.
Because you've already done that in the Philippines.
Yes, I've already done that, and then I took up fashion design.
Right.
Because at that time, in Australia, in Melbourne in particular, you have two dominant department stores, which are Myer and David Jones.
Okay.
And pretty much retail was one of the two dominant industries at that time. The other one was mining. So you didn't really have a choice. You either go to retail. Oh, well, there's banking as well, but I wasn't really into the whole banking and finance.
Right.
So I picked fashion design because I thought I was going to be this amazing designer. I said, I can draw, I can do all those doodles and all that. I could be great.
Yeah.
And then I got into fashion design, and all these 17-year-old kids were drawing much better than me. And I was like, oh, maybe that wasn't for me. But I persevered.
Good.
As we all do.
Because the reason I want you to sort of lay that out in front of our audiences who are listening to you, and the reason why we have you on our show is, it is so, your journey has been so diverse. Because one, it's pre-law and economics, and then on the other side is fashion designing, and then you started an IT startup.
I co-founded
with your husband, right?
Yes, my husband.
And then from that IT startup, that got sold, and now you're doing digital marketing, and in the digital space, you're trying to sort of reinvent that for a very, very traditional chemical distribution company here in Singapore. So that is why we want to sort of lay that out in front of our audience, for us to understand that you constantly changed your career path. And I'm sure in order for you to reach wherever you have right now, you had to reinvent yourself and sort of excel in that domain, wherever domain that you're trying to sort of, fit yourself into. My question to you would be that, why this change? Why to change yourself and this need to reinvent yourself?
First off, it was by necessity.
Okay.
And the second one would probably be more an unconscious awareness of what was happening economically in the environment. So I would say, for example, I went into fashion design in Australia because that's where I saw a lot of the businesses were. It was in retail. And for me to be able to get a job in retail, I need to understand retail. And just to continue on how I did in fashion, I was an average student, but there was a specific course in fashion design which was on buying and merchandising.
Right.
That's where I excelled.
Because it sort of had some remnants of economics?
Yeah, there was a business component to it, a management component of it, which I really understood. And I said, okay, I understood that now.
Okay.
However, what I then realized after I got into Kmart, when I worked into Kmart, is that even though I was an average student in fashion, I did understand the principles and the concepts of fashion. So I could look at a dress, for example, and I'd go, that's not going to sell.
Right.
And I can sort of go, well, it's not on trend, it's not geared towards our customer. So even though I wasn't really going towards fashion design and I wasn't a designer, you have that. I had it in my head.
And that helped you sort of make business decisions for your company at that point in time. That's lovely. And then when you moved from Australia to the US with your IT startup that you co-founded, how was that transition from a very... Australia as a cultural society is very different from America, and America being the heights of the capitalist revolution, if I may say. How did you sort of fit into that, and why didn't you continue your retail journey there? It
was, again, for me at that time, it was because I got burned out.
Right.
So when I was in Australia, I reached a point where I said, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And so it was a great opportunity for us when we had the business and we were negotiating. And they said, okay, we had options. So they said they had branches in Singapore, in the United States, and there was even one in Germany. And I said, we picked the US. And then within the US, they were also saying they had a branch in San Francisco. One was, I believe, in Florida. The other one was in Boston. And I said, I want to go to Boston.
Okay.
So my husband was like, why Boston? I said, well, there's Harvard there. I want to go to the museum. So it was very shallow. But I was like, I'm not going to Florida. I've been to Florida. I don't like it.
Too much sun?
Yeah, too much sun. It was more like Disneyland. I mean, it's the happiest place on earth. But I was thinking, well, if we're going to be spending our lives there for the next 2 years or so, might as well go where you could learn.
Right.
So we picked Boston. When I got there, I already had to start changing how I think and how I thought, because from the Philippines, it's a different culture altogether. You have this very hierarchical way of doing things.
I wanted to bring that in after we sort of come back to Singapore, and then so let's finish your travel back to Singapore from the US. How did you decide to come to Singapore after US?
So after US, we were there on an E3 visa.
Okay. Oh, it's again a necessity. More
it was
of
by necessity again. And because at the time, without being too political, the political climate was changing.
Oh, yes.
In the United States. And we were already anticipating, because we were visa holders. We said, something's going to change here and we might be impacted. So the minute they announced a new president, and at that time the company, my husband was already working for a company, were asking, okay, we are not going to start processing your visa. We said no, because we don't think we're going to be in a good place with the new administration. And we were right.
So
definitely. We left, and so we were actually thinking, we had the option, do we go back to Australia or do we go to another country? And for me, I told my husband, I will go with you, but it has to be a country where I will be given the option to work. It was the same thing. It was also the same decision why we went to America.
From Australia,
because again, as you probably know, the most common visa there is H-1B visa. It was pathway for permanent residency, but I said no. There has to be a different visa there, because I won't be able to work on an H-1B visa. And at that time, Australia, and I still think it still works, Australia has that, I think it was a trade agreement, which allowed E3 visa holders for their spouses to be able to work. And that's what we did. And the same decision spurred us to choose Singapore, because when we looked at Singapore, we said, okay, your dependents can work. So we said, yep, Singapore is going to be.
So now you are in Singapore and you're doing digital innovation for a traditional chemical distribution company. Now, the reason I wanted you to finish the journey and come back to Singapore is because I want to now start comparing and help us compare how the working culture is different, and then how did you have to reinvent yourself in these different working cultures within Philippines, Australia, Singapore, the US, and you did so many different areas of business. It's not just economics or business or retail or IT or you did different areas within different geographies, within different working cultures. So how did you sort of come across? How did you sort of change yourself in fitting into in these cultures, these working cultures?
I would say, again, it goes back to necessity. And that's the number one. It was always necessity, as well as, I would say, a conscious awareness of what was happening around me. So if I go back to what I mentioned about the Philippines, it's very hierarchical. It's very patriarchal as well. There are a lot of male bosses. I would say I was particularly fortunate that even though I work with male bosses, most of them, not all, most of them were relatively progressive in that they looked at me not because I was a woman and they gave me a lot of the admin stuff, but it was also for them a way to train me. So I got invited to a lot of high-level trainings, even though I was an underling. You consider that underling at that time. But they were also very good at coaching and telling me these are the reasons why we're doing it. Because me, in my naive 20-something-year-old, I was like, why are we doing this? It doesn't make sense. And they were good enough and kind enough to train me on some of those things. Not a lot, and some were probably for me still didn't make sense, but I had that opportunity to ask questions and they answered the questions. But I was still conscious of the hierarchy. I did not call my bosses by their first name. I had to call them by sir, first name, ma'am, first name, right? And then when I moved to Australia, I had to stop myself from calling my bosses, go, sir. I go, and then I have to understand that it's also different because again, in the Philippines, even though I was allowed to speak, there was still a certain limitation. Whereas in Australia, they're like, speak up. You want to be visible in the workplace, you have to be able to express your opinion. And again, I was fortunate that I had people take me under their wings, especially one particular lady, for example. She was my planning manager. She would go, Sheila, tell the planning manager what you're doing. And I'd be like, why? Why do I have to tell her? And it was an open space. You can literally hear somebody because they're on the other side. And she go, Sheila did this wonderful thing. And I go like, shh, don't say anything.
So in your journey, while you were figuring out the ropes of the business in the new culture, in a new country, you always had somebody sort of to guide you through. would that be right to sort of say that a guide is very important in your journey towards transforming yourself?
In a way, I would say yes.
Yeah.
But you also need to make the decision on whether you accept the guidance.
Yeah.
I would say I was fortunate that some of these people...
So if you were to sort of, I'm sorry to cut you
Yes.
short, but if you were to sort of then think what you did different in order to sort of find yourself in that position, how would you sort of spell that out for us? Like, what did you do different?
It was a combination of one having, I don't know what you call them, mentor and coaches, but at the same time questioning those mentors and those coaches, because they come from a different space, they come from a different environment, they come from a different culture and background. I come from a different background. So sometimes when they tell me something, I would go, I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't think I'd be able to do that. But for them, they're like, no, you can just do it. Like what I mentioned a while ago, or my boss would just go tell the planning manager that you did this, and this. And for me, it's like, that's not me. I'm an introvert. I'm like, okay, I'm a high functioning introvert. I just don't go tell people this is what I did.
Breaking your own cultural stereotypes within yourself.
Yes,
is something that you had to sort of deal with.
It has to be a conscious decision. And I made that decision later on when I started thinking, it actually makes sense what they're saying, that I have to speak up, that I have to tell people what I'm doing, because otherwise you will never know. You can have an advocate and a supporter, but they will not be there all the time. You need to be able to start saying, I did this, and be comfortable enough to say it. So that was the first thing. You need to break whatever mold, whatever barrier you have in your head, but you also need to adapt within that environment.
So now when you look back at your career and the experiences that you've had, that one thing that you had the most struggle to break out from, do you know, that you think of? That one cultural barrier, one cultural mold that you had to, like, the most difficulty breaking out from?
It was probably more of the fear of embarrassing myself.
No, I totally get it. As Asian kids, I'm not too sure about how it sort of goes in other countries, especially like in America. We are constantly told not to question your seniors and, not just accept it exactly how it is. Otherwise, you're going to embarrass yourself.
Even in the classroom, right? They make you stand. Well, I don't know how it was in your schools, but they make a stand when they answer the question. Yeah. And if you get it wrong, everybody's like, you got it wrong, or you got it wrong.
Okay.
So it's the same thing as well.
To break fear.
Work,
Okay.
Yeah, to get over it. But at the same time, it also, and I have to keep learning it as well. I mean, even my current bosses would go like, listen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you just go blah, 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 without thinking. And I still do that. I admit, I still do that. I just go like, this is what they're going to say. This is what they're going to say. I'm going to start answering. It's like, no, that's not what I wanted to say. So I was like, okay, fine. So it can go the extreme.
Right.
I mean, I think I've slowly already broken that mold of like, oh my God, I'm going to say something, they're going to laugh at me, to the point where like, I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to answer it. So, so I still have to sort of
find a balance between the two.
Speaking up, and then listening, and then answering the right question.
Right. So that's like, I think the first thing that we gain from your journey is like how to break our own cultural molds and our own fears and overcome our fears. If you were to sort of take another take on this and give me another thing that you learned in your journey, is what that would be?
I would say don't be afraid to ask questions and to also ask for help. So I say that because I burnt out because I took it upon myself to solve whatever problems were happening at work. Because I felt like, oh my God, they gave me this responsibility, I need to be able to deliver. And then I realized later on, no, you need to raise your hands and say, I need help. And I try to bring that with me wherever I go now. That the minute I start sensing, okay, I'm about to go burnout, I'd go like, I need help. It's great when you have a boss, a manager, a supervisor who can sense that. But you also need to be aware, and I also need to be consciously aware that my bosses have their own problems. I'm there, I'm a little nugget, for example, but I also need to be able to say, guys, I need help, or ladies, I need help. And that is really something that I have to tell people, don't take it upon yourself to the point where you burn out. But I would say it's also a matter of ego, be humble enough to
yes.
admit that you don't know all
How
the answers.
can't I solve this problem? I can do this. I'm going to die under this rock, the burden, but I'm not going to. That's beautiful.
Exactly.
I think a lot of us do that. We think that, oh, they've entrusted us. We take it upon ourselves that they've entrusted us with all this responsibility. I'll make a fool of myself if I go and say, oh, you thought I could do it, but I can't do it anymore.
Yes.
Wow, yeah, that's a great learning that we all need help at some given point in time. We all need our help, and so our bosses also need help.
I'm sure they do. They probably have a lot of stuff happening in their heads and in their lives.
Right. I also want to understand, like, because you dealt with different working cultures. There's one thing that sort of you learned from all these cultures. If you can tell us,
I would say when I started in the Philippines, it was probably more of learning by watching and doing. And that is where I also took it with me when I went to Australia, was to first observe. Start to understand what the environment is.
Right.
Because they're two very different environments, and then start to adapt.
Right.
It's very clear that, for example, in Australia, I had to adapt. I couldn't just be myself in my tiny little corner, because I also saw that in my colleagues. A lot of them were Asian, where they were very quiet, and for them, they believe that their work speaks for themselves, that they didn't have to say anything.
Right.
So
because in our cultures, it's almost borderline rude to sort of blow your own trumpet and say, oh, I did this, right?
It wasn't. I wouldn't really call it rude. I would probably classify it as, you would be called boastful.
Boastful, yeah.
Yes.
Like, in that sense, like, because we are taught to be humble all the time and sort of,
and then wait for others to speak about you and say like, oh yes, thank you very much for the praise. Yes. So, and then from there, and then in America, it was also very different, because people were very in your face.
Right.
And especially when I started meeting people who were studying at MIT, at Harvard, I was just in awe, because they were very confident. And I was thinking, can I be that too?
Right.
Can I do it? Can I say something? When I started learning about public speaking, and I was joining all of this groups, for example, and I met people from different walks of life, but all of them are very confident about what they believe in and what they were doing. So slowly I also started to adapt that, and I had to own what I was saying. So that's what it also taught me. It's like you have to own whatever it is that you want to be known for. That's what I learned in America.
That's a great learning. Like, you need to own whatever you want to be known for. But how does one get to that? If you were to tell this to our audiences, and in your journey, things that you've learned about yourself and how you own it up to yourself, how does one get to learn that? And how does I know what I want to achieve and what I want to be known as? Are there any tips you can give?
It's going to be a process. First off, I would like to say it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
But the first thing is to make a conscious decision that you really want to change, that you really want to reinvent yourself.
Yes.
There is no point saying, I'm going to be this person or I'm going to have this career, if at the onset you don't make that decision.
Right.
So once you make that decision to say, yes, I'm going to either be going through this career, let's say data analytics, for example, there are a lot of resources online. There are a lot of free webinars happening right now that you can go and learn from. And then you start looking, is it really something that interests you? Is it really something that you can say, yes, I am going to be interested, I'm going to be dedicated, I will learn all of these things. Because like I said, it's a process. When you find that, no, it's not something that's going to be interesting to you in the long term, then you already know at the onset that, okay, that career is not for you. And you can then pivot and do something else. But you first need to make that decision, start learning. And the second would be find a community. Find a community, find your tribe, your community, your network, whatever it is you call it, in order for you to be able to share your ideas, ask questions. Again, find probably your own mentor within that community, but it has to be a supportive community.
And I have to tell this to our audiences that Sheila also heads the She Loves Data community here in Singapore. right?
Oh, no. I don't head the Sheila's Data community.
You're a part of the Sheila's Data community.
I'm part of the Sheila's Data community.
Which is also that it brings different women from different walks of life together and gives them a platform to sort of interact with other women, right?
Yes, and we also train them on data, programming. We partner with companies like Microsoft, Google, LinkedIn to show them what are the ways that you can apply data in your lives. We've also had, I believe even before I joined Sheila's Data, they were doing a lot of trainings in R and Python and Ruby. So it's really, the mission is really to get as many women
together
to get interested in data and to change careers to head towards data.
Lovely. So that's the second thing, that find your tribe, find your community so that you can grow with them and they can help you grow. The third thing, if you were to
the third thing would be owning it. Own the transformation, own the reinvention. Do not let anybody tell you, what, you're a data analytics? No.
You can't do this.
Yes, because it's so easy for you to then let negativity go like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe this is really not for me. Oh, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But you really need to start owning that.
Right.
Because if you don't, nobody else is going to own it for you.
Wow. So you need to first start your homework, like you said. First, make a decision that you want to reinvent yourself. Start learning, going out in the world, take courses, webinars, seminars, and then eventually, once you found your footing, once you found your tribe, start owning it.
Definitely.
Don't let anybody diss you and tell you can't do it.
Yes, you will have a lot of negative Nancy's in your lives.
Has there been a scenario like that in your life where you've been told that you can't do it?
Oh yes, I did. And for me, I would say that was very disappointing.
Yeah.
Because it was in a community where I thought I was going to be supported. But the criticism actually came from that community.
And it wasn't constructive criticism.
It was not constructive. I was deliberately told, Sheila is not a marketer. Why is she doing marketing? And I went, whoa. That was like a smack to the face for me, because I thought, I'm doing marketing. What is a marketer to you?
Right.
Because I was doing Facebook marketing, I was doing LinkedIn at that time, I was doing a lot of post social media, and to be told that you're not a marketer, you're not doing marketing, so how can you call yourself a marketer? I was like, oh, and you will get that. I believe the audience will also get those kinds of comments.
What did you do?
I just proved myself. I always take it as a challenge. The minute somebody tells me you are not this or you can't do this, I'd go, I'm going to show you. I mean, the classic example would be when somebody tells me your PowerPoint decks are ugly. I'd go, I'm going to show you, I'm going to prettify it, I'm going to do all of these things. And for me, it's actually a challenge that I take.
Yeah.
And then I learn. I mean, everything that you do, it's part of your growth professionally and personally. So take it as a challenge. You'll probably get bogged down a little bit, but don't let it really push you down and then say, I'm not going to do this anymore. Use it as a way to say, okay, they said that, maybe I need to learn something, maybe I need to take some more courses, talk to people, talk to experts, and eventually just go, yes, I've reached the level that I wanted to achieve.
All this while, you've achieved so much, and I know you have worked really, really hard to achieve whatever you have in your life and where you stand right now. But is there anything in life that is still left to be done, still left to be achieved, or you take life as it comes?
No, definitely not. I don't take life as it comes. I actually look at myself and I always tell myself, there is a finite number of days that you are alive. Make sure you leave a legacy.
Right.
And that's what I've been trying to do, and which is why I've been so involved in a lot of the volunteer organizations that I'm part of, is because I want to make an impact.
Right.
I want to be able to say, even though I've only touched one person's life, if it made an impact or a change in their life, then I'd be happy, because that is my legacy, that I was able to help somebody.
Is that your life goal that you want to sort of achieve?
Yes, that is my life goal, and that is to have a legacy. But I don't know whether touching people's lives is going to be my ultimate goal. I just want to have a legacy. I don't know what that is yet. Like you, I'm still learning. It's still evolving.
Right.
It might be something amazing, but I do not want to be an anonymous being at the end of my life.
That's a huge goal to achieve. That's a huge goal to sort of have, where you've impacted somebody in a positive way in life. But I think this talk is going to do the same, Sheila. Thank you so much for sharing.
So.
No, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and how can we reinvent, and the 3 mantras that you've given: learning, creating a community around you, and owning it up. own up your goals. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for joining us. And maybe you can come back again and talk more about the things that you've learned.
If you have me, definitely.
Most definitely. Sure. I'm sure our audiences will love to have you back.
Thank
you. Guys, you please join us again on another podcast with the Bulletin Bytes, where we bring somebody like Sheila again to talk about their journey in life and things that we can learn from their journey. In the meanwhile, please follow us on different social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, and you can find the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.